Hi everybody, and welcome to DTown TV, the weekly show for DSLR shooters. My name is Scott Kelby.
And I'm Matt Kluskowski. We're back with a brand new show here. We've got Scott Bourne on this week's show. He's going to talk a little bit about shooting video with your DSLR, but first, you got a tip?
I do have a tip. This tip is for beginners, so if you're brand new to shooting DSLR, this is absolutely for you. I get this question asked again and again and again. They say, I bought a DSLR, I bought a really nice camera, and of course the first thing you realize is that the flash on your camera does mean things to your photographs. So you turn off the flash. It's one of the first things people realize, why don't my stuff look? So they put the flash down. So now you're in good shape, but here's what happens. They're shooting shots indoors, and they look good on the back of the camera. You open them on your computer, and they're all blurry. Yeah. Part of the problem is everything looks good on this little thing, right? When was the last time I don't know what you have to do to make a photo look blurry on your LCD. You have to move it crazy. So what happens is you're looking at them this small, you think they look good. So there's a couple of things that we can do to actually get you sharper photos indoors, okay, without using the flash. Number one is your hand holding technique. One is how you hold the camera. Tuck your elbows in towards your body to kind of strengthen everything. Hand under here, and try to really focus on keeping the camera still, and don't just just kind of roll it off there just kind of roll it like almost like you're rolling it, like you're getting fingerprinted, I guess is a good way to describe it. That's number one. Number two is just being aware that the sharpness of your photos is partially dependent on how still you hold the camera helps. But those are not the things that are probably going to really make the biggest difference. The biggest problem is when you look through here and you're shooting, if you see your shutter speed fall below 1/60th of a second. So if you look in here and you see it on the left side of your screen, you see like a 40, a 20, a 10. It is absolutely guaranteed your photos are either going to be at the very least soft or more likely just completely blurry and unusable. Here's what you got to do. First thing, try the lowest number f-stop you can. So if you were shooting at f8, move down to f.6. If you can go lower to f4, if you can go to f2.8, even better. Those things will raise your shutter speed, and they're going to help freeze the action a lot better. If you do that, if you go to the lowest number you can, so on this lens I could go to maybe f5.6. So let's say that I can go lower than that, can't I? So let's say we go to f4. If we do that, and then it still is below 1/60th of a second, what you're going to have to do is raise the camera's ISO. As you raise the ISO from like 100 to 200, 200 to 400, 400 to 800, that's going to give you more shutter speed and help freeze the action. So those are the two things that you really need to do to help kind of freeze the action. Now you got to realize, you got little kids running around and stuff, you're going to have to raise it even faster. Yeah. Most people will do pretty good at 1/125th of a second and up. I know professional photographers that can hand-hold this thing down to 1/10 of 1 second, but for most of us, 1/60th is the threshold. Anything above that is great. So there's just a couple of tips for beginners on how to get sharper shots, especially when you're indoors without using flash.
Cool. Well, hey everybody, we are coming up on Photoshop World. So it's a big Photoshop conference. We've got an all-day Lightroom track that goes through the whole conference as well. It's in Orlando, Florida. It's March 24th through the 26th. Now, it's big news now because the early bird special ends right around February 27th. You'll save $100 off of the conference admission. I'm teaching HDR class there, Lightroom, Photoshop. You're teaching?
I've got Lightroom, Photoshop, a whole bunch of stuff. So I hope you'll join us there in Orlando, Photoshop World. Go to photoshopworld.com for more details. Hey, we were very lucky to have Scott Bourne drop by. So Scott is famous from the photofocus.com podcast, and he's just famous in general. He's a great photographer, and we got him to stop by. He's got some tips for shooting video with your DSLR, so let's take a look.
Well, hi everybody. I am here with Scott Bourne from photofocus.com. Welcome, Scott.
Hey man, thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, anytime. You got some cool stuff to talk about. DSLRs, video becoming very popular lately, and you have really taken charge of that area and doing a lot of cool stuff with it. I know you got a cool rig, so you want to start to break it up and just kind of tell everybody a little bit more about it.
Yeah, video is like the flu for me. I caught it and I don't want to get rid of it. I really am having fun. After 30 years of shooting stills, this is something new to play with.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not the expert I want to be. I've been taking filmmaking classes. I quickly learned there's some gear you can buy to make these things perform better. What you see here is a rig from Red Rock Micro. They're one of the suppliers that makes the additional accessories that help these kinds of cameras perform like real movie cameras.
Yeah.
And this is an ENG rig, which stands for Electronic News Gathering Rig. You pick it up, you put it on your shoulder, you can move the camera around much more carefully and detailed.
And I think that's probably one of the first things for anybody that wants to get into this to understand is that you can do a lot if you're just going to handhold the camera. But if you want those videos that you're seeing online and you want to get the quality from that stuff, that's where you got to kind of start, you know, getting a couple other pieces of equipment.
And as still photographers, we're used to locking these things down on tripods. But in video, it's all about movement. If you look carefully at the TV shows you watch, the movies, you'll see camera movement all the time.
Yeah.
And most of us in the field certainly can't afford a dolly or a big jib, so this is the next best thing. You throw this on your shoulder and you can move, and it looks really steady. So the pieces are the follow focus, the hand grips, the rails. We're just going to talk mostly about that part. We do have a viewer here in the back, which we'll discuss on another episode. You've got a shoulder module for steadying, and all these things are meant to be points of contact that steady the device. You set it all up so that it's comfortable for you. And now it won't be comfortable for the next guy.
Exactly.
It's going to, you know, the distance between the shoulder mount and the rig will change. The height of the camera will change sometimes depending on the lens you're using. But essentially, everything that you need for, you know, a good basic kit is here. This particular kit, not including the 1D Mark IV and the 85-1.2 that we have, is about $2,500 from both Red Rock Micro and Zacuto.
Okay, and we're going to talk about those things in another segment. But the Red Rock Micro, where can we find something like that at?
RedRockMicro.com. They have a whole bunch of kits, and they start way cheaper than that. You can just get basics.
Yeah.
And the great thing about it, Matt, is it's modular. So you can add pieces to it. You don't have to buy everything you need right off the bat.
Okay.
I mean, we've got mat boxes that go on here, all kinds of crazy stuff. But you can just start with a basic rig with rails and grips and then move up.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, where can people find out a little bit more about Scott Bourne, the man behind Scott Bourne?
Well, just go to photofocus.com or follow me on Twitter, Scott Bourne on Twitter, and I talk about this stuff all the time.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I know we're going to have you on again in the future.
Can't wait.
And we appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rich Harrington, and I'd like to invite you to check out Creating Video with Digital SLR Cameras at Photoshop World. Now, the cool thing about this class is it's all hands-on. We're going to divide into small production teams, and we have a real-world project to work on. You're going to learn about essential pre-production, like storyboarding your shots and figuring out the angles that you need for coverage. And then we'll move out into the field and learn the unique requirements for lighting and audio. Once we got all that footage gathered up, we're going to come back to the classroom and edit it all together. It's Creating Video with Digital SLR Cameras as part of Photoshop World. Sign up today. We only have 40 spots, so visit photoshopworld.com, click on that pre-conference button, and get registered.
Hey, Matt's got a special tip for you this week on how to meter snow. You're shooting outdoors, shooting in the snow. Here's how to do it, and here's how to post-process it.
Well, we don't have as much of this problem here in Florida, but if you live up north, there's a lot of snow. And now we've been getting a lot of questions on shooting in the snow. I was actually up in Pittsburgh for the Christmas holiday and shooting my kids while they were out snow tubing. And I've got some tips for you. And the first ones are kind of about in the camera, and then the second tip is more on a post-processing side. All right, so first tip. By default, our cameras are probably set to matrix metering mode. It's called matrix on a Nikon, it's called evaluative on a Canon. And in that metering mode, it's the camera's looking at the entire scene, which is very bright in this circumstance with all the bright snow, and it's making an exposure decision based on that. So I had my camera set to matrix metering, and what I was getting is gray snow and people's faces were dark, which makes sense because the camera's kind of pulling back on the exposure because it sees all that bright snow. So what you can do in the camera is first change over to spot metering mode. On a Nikon, you've got a little switch on the back of the camera, and you can see here by default mine was set to matrix metering. It's kind of the one with the little spot with everything around it. And what I do is just change it over to a little dot, and that's spot metering. On your Canons, it's going to be a little bit different. There's a button on the 50D that's right up top. It's with the white balance button, and when I click that and I press it down and then I just move my top dial, I'm able to change from matrix or evaluative to spot metering. And again, that's just the one with the little dot in the middle. Okay, and right there, and I'm going to put some images on screen for you so you can see the before and after. Just by doing that, just by putting the focus point over their faces and by having spot metering turned on, we're getting a much better exposure. We're letting the camera do the work for us, and it's developing a better exposure. Instead of looking at the entire scene, it's just looking at what we're focusing on. Okay, now if I'm shooting in the snow, the other thing I do, exposure compensation, put it up by about a 1/6 of a stop to a full stop. And what that's going to do is that's going to brighten the scene even more, and it might even take you to the point where you'll see some of the blinkies in the snow, a little bit of highlight clipping. But that takes us into our post-processing tip, because I know that if I have that highlight clipping, I'd rather the rest of the scene be properly exposed. When you get into Lightroom or you get into Photoshop or Camera Raw, and you come in here, I'm going to turn on the highlight clipping here, and you can see that there's a considerable amount. But the recovery slider works wonders. All right, just take the recovery slider, start dragging it over to the right, and it's really good at recovering the detail on those highlights, but keeping the rest of the photo properly exposed so everything else still looks good. All right, so we got spot metering, we got exposure compensation, and then when we get the photo on the computer, the recovery slider, it's gonna really make your photos look a lot better. Enjoy those pictures out there in the winter wonderland.
Hey, I want to turn you guys on to the work of a very, very cool photographer. His name is Tim Tatter. You can go to timtatter.com and check out his work. He is a sports advertising photographer. So he does commercial photography, but he has a very sports bent to it and stuff.
Awesome portfolio.
Very, very cool stuff. Lots of cool post-processing stuff. So go check out his work at timtatter.com.
All right, folks, well, that wraps up the show for this week. Next week, we're going to have Scott Bourne continue his series on shooting video with your DSLR. In the meantime, I'm Matt Kluskowski.
I'm Scott Kelby. We'll see you back here next week for DTown TV. Take care.